You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin the Cleric.
And me, Paul Brophy. This evening, Roisin, we're continuing our series of our conversations with general election candidates, which is going to be sooner than we think. And this evening, we're delighted to be joined by Michael Doyle, who is one of three Fine Gael candidates for the Carlow Kilkenny constituency. Michael is a Fine Gael member of Kilkenny County Council for 10 years. He was first elected in 2014 to the Mammoth constituency. That was Kilkenny's, originally from the picturesque village of Inistoige. Michael is a former chair of Kilkenny County Council and he's also a former mayor. In 2019, in the new electoral area of Callan Thomastown, Michael was elected with a first preference vote of 1,378 votes. Michael was also re-elected in 2024, there back in June, to the electoral area of Callan Thomastown, where he gained the fourth seat in a six-seater constituency. So now Michael is taking the next step, and he's as I said, he's one of three candidates that will be contesting the general election for Fine Gael here in Carlow Kilkenny, who will be hoping to retain the seat currently held by outgoing Fine Gael TD John Paul Phelan, who of course is retiring at the next election. Michael, you're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup.
Thanks, Paul. Delighted to be here, and hello to Roisin as well. No, it's great to be here.
Michael, we haven't had the opportunity to have a one-to-one with you. We had you at an interview on the live stream off at the Camp Centre in March, and then you came on again with some of your colleagues. So we've never had the opportunity to have you on a one-to-one. So we're curious, and maybe our audience would love to know who don't know you, but I'm sure everyone knows you. But who are you? And you've been in politics since 2014, am I right there? And
Yeah, correct.
so were you always interested in politics? Do you come from a political family, or what inspired, and who inspired you? A lot of questions there, but why did you get involved in local politics?
Yeah, I suppose, Roisin, I'm delighted to be interrogated, I suppose, number one. But I suppose my interest in politics, my family would have been involved in politics over the years. My father would have been actually the first man to ever canvass with Phil Hogan back in the day when Phil was starting out. So that's a while back now, and that's how involved I suppose my family have been in politics. My father is from Coon, and my mother's from Castlecomer, so we would have been up in Phil Hogan's neck of the woods at that stage in his early career, and they would have supported Phil starting off in his political career. So we always had an interest in politics at home. How I got into local politics, I suppose I'll blame John Paul Phelan for that. He came down, he called in to me actually after a funeral one day, and he sat down, and I was involved in the community at the time and involved in the hurling club, I suppose, and he said, think about it. The local elections are coming up shortly. You have a bit of name recognition through sport and through my family, I suppose, name and that, and there might be a chance. So I thought about it, took the chance, and things worked out. So that, I suppose, where it started out from, and things have been progressing ever since, I suppose, whether for good and bad reasons within politics. So it's great. I enjoy it, and I'm happy to do it.
And Michael, you've been a member of Kilkenny County Council since 2014, and you're a former chair of Kilkenny County Council last year, and you were also former mayor as well. As mad as this might sound, someone from Inistoige becoming mayor of Kilkenny, but it actually did happen. What were what's been kind of the highlights of your time so far in local government?
Yeah, obviously being mayor and chairman of Kilkenny County Council, those two appointments are huge highlights in itself. But I think both give me an appreciation of, I suppose as mayor, it gave me a huge appreciation of how important Kilkenny City is, and the importance of how if Kilkenny City is not getting investment and doing well, it needs that investment all the time. It's the main economic driver of Kilkenny. And when Kilkenny City is doing well, I think all the other towns and villages benefit from that. And it just showed me how life is like within the city as well, and the different challenges that they have compared to as being chairman of Kilkenny County Council. You would be more of a broader aspect encompassing rural life as well, and rural issues that are out there. So those two perspectives it was great to improve my knowledge in relation to life within the city and life within rural Ireland then and rural Kilkenny. So those were the two proudest moments, being mayor and chair. There's no doubt in that.
And of course, there's been a big announcement by your colleague, Minister Patrick Donovan, for Minister for Higher Education, that Kilkenny City is going to receive €5 million in investment for a new College of Further Education in Kilkenny City. So you must be absolutely delighted with that.
No, that's absolutely fantastic news, obviously. So it's the initial investment is for site purchase and for design stage of a new college campus in Kilkenny, and that investment, and I suppose it will amount to millions of euros worth of an investment by the time we actually get to build this campus. But they're looking to potentially train and educate up to 5,000 people out in that campus, which is absolutely massive for Kilkenny, and it's hugely welcome. And it's another feather in the cap for Kilkenny that will really benefit the people that are within the city and county of Kilkenny.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And it's a very good site as well. It's a big site, and it's semi-serviced as well. So that's a great site to acquire.
And that's just up from me, isn't it? I'm in Lochboy, so that's just up from me by Taxback.
Just beyond Taxback.
Correct. It's just Danville there, yeah.
Yes, and there's a good bus route from there too to the city up from that area as well. So yeah.
15-acre site that, as Paul has said, it's pretty well serviced. I'm sure once it gets up and running, there will have to be extra services and extra road traffic measures put in, because it will be an extremely busy place. But I mean, isn't it great that we'll have such a facility in Kilkenny at long last? We've always wanted a college of education in Kilkenny, and now we're going to get one.
Very good.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's great news, and I suppose, Michael, you're out knocking on the doors since the last while. What kind of issues are coming up?
Yeah, a varied amount of issues. I suppose I've done a lot of rural canvass currently, so I would be getting anything from individual housing planning issues to road issues to drainage. All politics is definitely local, because the problems outside their door and within their own little communities, those are the problems they are interested in and want to be fixed. So local issues are coming up hot and heavy on the doors. That's for definite, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the election is not going to be far away, and housing is going to be a big issue. Of course, Fine Gael have been in government for nearly 14 years. How would you assess where housing is at now in Carlow Kilkenny, particularly in the rural areas that you're living in?
Kilkenny is doing pretty well in relation to the housing figures, and I know that's of no comfort to those that are waiting or on a list. But they're very proactive, and the building commencements in Kilkenny is increasing year on year, and the list is reducing slowly. The issue I would have with, I suppose, housing and the planning element around it is that it is difficult to get housing outside of the city. So we currently have a good bit of development within the city. There's development within Callan, and there's development in progress in Thomastown, but there's not a lot of other areas within the county that would see a significant amount of building done, which does leave those rural settlements a little bit isolated and under pressure. So there needs to be changes there, I feel, in allowing for the smaller towns and villages to be allowed to put a scheme of houses in those towns and villages that would allow. And now, when I say a scheme of houses, that would allow the 8 to 10 house scheme be built, so that it would help hold on to your shop, hold on to your pub, hold on to your post office, hold on to your teachers in the school, and allow to maintain all the services that are required to keep villages going. So that would be something that I would need, that I would be looking for improvement within.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gordon, if you read various different reports, they estimate we need to build about 50,000 houses a year over the next number of years just to meet demand. Do we have the skilled tradesmen to do that, Michael? Because I believe, from my memory serves me correct, you qualified as a carpenter.
Yeah, I'm a qualified carpenter, and I would speak into fellow colleagues, I suppose, and those that I've worked with in the past. And the reality is out there, whatever party you're involved with or a member of, those sort of figures, in my view, currently are unachievable, because the skilled force, the workforce, is just not there. We came from a position in I suppose about 2012, 2013, where 2/3 of our construction industry was completely wiped away, and we had to completely rebuild. And I was part of that, in that I had to retrain, because as a carpenter, I had no work. There was no work, and I had to reskill and ended up as a healthcare assistant. So that just shows you I'm one of thousands that retrained or emigrated, and the construction sector was non-existent. That all takes time to build up. It is ramping up, and we can see that with the increase in housing development. But those figures won't be achieved until we keep recruiting more and more skilled tradesmen going forward.
Of course, and I suppose the new College of Further Education in Kilkenny is going to have a big emphasis on apprenticeships. So your plumbers, your carpenters, your fitters, the list goes on and on. So that's going to have a real big positive impact as regards, helping fill that shortage that's there.
That's going to be absolutely huge, and it's all very progressive, and that will help the construction industry in this region anyway, which is brilliant.
Absolutely.
They talk about affordable housing, Michael. What would Fine Gael class as affordable housing? I'm talking to an awful lot of people. I know my daughter's a doctor, and even she says she couldn't even afford to get even a 1-bedroom apartment on her own salary. So what is affordable in affordable housing for young people now?
Yeah, I suppose it's very hard. I suppose across the country, those levels definitely vary. I mean, you're talking ridiculous numbers in the large urban centres, Dublin, Cork, Waterford, those areas. Very, very hard to purchase anything, I would imagine. So, I mean, each individual area, I think, needs to be looked on its own merit, because you can't put a blanket figure across the country and say, well, that's our idea of an affordable house, because the price range varies so much. So I suppose from my point of view, if you're looking for affordable housing or looking for supports to help you buy your house, the region that you live in needs to be taken into consideration. And the supports are reasonably good, but in some areas, that the house prices are just so high, people just can't get onto the property ladder. So it needs to be looked on an individual basis, I think, instead of a blanket that would cover everywhere, because each place is completely individual and different price range. So I hope they would maybe address it that way.
Yeah, that is a very fair point, because when you try to put a figure on it, my definition versus your definition, or Roisin's definition, someone else's definition, they're all going to be very different.
Absolutely, yeah.
When you
And
think back in my day, because I'm quite a lot older than you two young men, I bought my first house when I was 23 for 21,000.
Wow.
My God.
And when you think back then, that was in 1990. Yeah.
Oh.
And then I bought a piece of land then and built a house. So it just goes to show the difference in years. I suppose I'm like my granny back in my day saying that, but it just goes to show, and but there again, my wages were lower back then as well. So if you think about it, the wages was lower.
Oh, absolutely. My father, we initially moved from Muckalee down to Inistoige, and we would have bought the shop in Inistoige at the time, and around 1983. But yet again, he bought that shop was a large building with a business, an active business in it, and he paid 18,000 for it at that stage. So there was a property that was actually bringing in money. But I mean, there were challenges in business back then as well. 18,000 for a property in the middle of Inistoige. I don't think it would buy the front garden now in any place in Inistoige.
Yeah, exactly. Of course,
And
there were
when you
very
think about the
big
80s,
interest rates then.
and the 80s and everything that happened in the 80s as well. Do you know, with all the economic downturn in the 80s, and Ireland got back up on its feet again. So yeah. But you talked about your father moving from Muckalee to Inistoige. That brings us on lovely to our next topic of conversations, and that's rural Ireland.
Yes, very good.
We can swiftly move over. So rural Ireland often feels very forgotten by politicians and government, Michael. How would Fine Gael if they're back in government, how would they support people living in rural Ireland, from farmers to small businesses to shop owners and even local transport?
Yeah, there is an issue there in relation to every aspect that you've mentioned. If I was lucky enough to be elected, I would definitely be shouting and looking for more supports that are currently being given in rural Ireland. I live in rural Ireland. I understand the challenges that are there. One of the things that I see is an issue is the investment. And I may have said this to you before, but with the waste water and the water infrastructure that's currently across rural Ireland. So currently, the majority of small towns and villages in rural Kilkenny, we'd say, not just in rural Ireland, but rural Kilkenny, no houses can be built. If shops, schools, businesses are going to stay open in rural Ireland, they need people living in rural Ireland. And if they can't live in rural Ireland, those places are going to struggle and close. So that is definitely number one. So that 14 billion that they got from Apple, that needs to be there needs to be half of that, in my view. given to Irish Water to invest in rural Ireland. Because currently the living trend at the moment, like in Kilkenny, if you just take Kilkenny as an example, that people can't, and a huge amount of people can't actually afford to buy a site in rural Ireland and then build their house. So they're being pushed into Kilkenny City where houses are being built, or Callan, as I mentioned, or Thomastown. All the other areas are not being developed. So there's an imbalance there straight away. So we need to be able to allow small schemes of houses be built in rural Ireland. That needs investment in water and wastewater services across rural Ireland, which is absolutely massive because it keeps the villages alive with the services that they have. Like the Roar, for example, is 4 miles away from me, the village there. It has a pub, a shop, petrol station, a school, church. It has all the services that a lot of bigger places don't have. But if people can't get planning or we can't build a small little development of houses there, those businesses are going to die.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a huge change that's needed across rural Ireland.
And when you bring people, you have people and houses, you have to bring shops, you have to bring other amenities out there as well. And you brought up a point, and it was something I have never mentioned before, that I never understood the issues that rural Ireland was having with water and water being cut off until one day we were talking to your former political colleague, Patrick O'Neill. He's a regular here on the Irish Political Roundup. And we were talking about farming, was it, Paul, at the time?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And I never
Pat's a beef
realized,
farmer as well.
yeah, I never realized that, rural Ireland sometimes, some days they didn't have water, it was cut off because they were fixing the water pipes. So a lot of wastewater going off there and people are being cut off. I never realized that, and it's something now that I appreciate.
Yeah, without doubt. And Patrick is obviously, he's an active farmer. And my call for investment in say water and wastewater funding would also help and benefit farming because the reality is if farming is going to keep the derogation, water quality needs to be improved. So you currently take Inistoige, I'm very local, but this is across loads of towns and villages across the length and breadth of Kilkenny. Inistoige, case in point, Irish Water have to upgrade that sewerage system. There's a problem with the sewerage system there. And there's an overflow pipe that is constantly, at times, flowing into the River Nore. Farmers will get blamed for poor water quality in the River Nore, where I can point to Irish Water overflow pipe constantly flowing in the River Nore. So what should they address? Should they blame the farmers or should they blame Irish Water? Because I can definitely say Irish Water have an issue there. So an investment in the wastewater will lift all boats, in my view.
And you're obviously talking to a lot of farmers. You live in a very rural agriculture area, Michael. I'm sure you can understand a lot of their frustrations. They feel that, in the case you pointed out, water quality, that farmers seem to be taking the rap for something that they shouldn't be.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I suppose it's farming. They feel like they're ploughing a lone furrow, really, in the battle for climate change, and they're expected to change and deal with it, and nobody else or any other sector is asked to do as much as the rural farmer is asked to do at the moment, and that's seriously affecting their livelihoods.
Yeah, but without a shadow of a doubt. And a topic, Michael, both Roisin and myself, we've discussed on the Irish Political Roundup is our food supply. We're living in Kilkenny, which is has some wonderful, soil and land and stuff like that. We export a hell of a lot of our food abroad, which is a good thing, absolutely. But we're still importing a lot of things that we could, you know, produce more of here. What are your thoughts on that? Should we become more self-sufficient? Because food security has become a big issue over the last number of years.
Yeah, 100%, and we do obviously export a huge amount. But it does go back to the price, in my view, that farmers are being paid for their produce. We supply the best quality food in the world. We
Yeah.
can produce
Yeah.
unbelievable quality food. Farmers need to be paid for that. Like, I mean, the reality is the rules and regulations and restrictions that are placed on farmers now, for climate change and for all these new measures that have come in, that is seriously impacting a farmer's income. And the reality is, unless a farmer is being paid, unless he's viable and making a few pound, he can't invest in improving the way he farms. He has to make money first.
Yeah.
If you're asking a farmer to invest when he's not making money, it's not going to happen.
How
So
can we make then it affordable? How can we make it viable for farmers to produce maybe even more food to export, because we need to export, but also enough food for Irish people to buy and shop local from local produce grown locally with local farmers. Because we did a program recently, and it was 99% of our vegetables are imported, and we only eat sort of consume 1%. And it's really, and when you think about climate change, surely if we're importing all that food, that's affecting the climate change. It's hypocritical in one sense. Oh, climate change, we have to. We need. How then is a strategy? How can maybe Fine Gael and politicians come up a government strategy to make it viable for farmers to be able to support Irish consumers and food, and yet affordable for Irish shoppers to go into the supermarket and say, I want to buy from a local farmer. I want to buy my carrots, my scallions, my cauliflowers from a local farmer. And so how can we get that win-win situations from farmers and consumers?
in my view, farm income supports. If farmers realize that there's actually a decent living to be made, there will more people get into the market, which will produce more food, which will lower prices, which will allow the Irish produce to be competitive in the Irish market, and would then therefore be available to Irish people at an affordable price. That is number one. The problem with food security currently is there's less and less people producing, because it's not viable to farm. And so when you restrict the market, then you're going to have worries about food supply and food security. That is the reality. So people need to be paid. They're not looking for a fortune.
No.
Because it's a way of life for them. They were born and reared into it. They want to be fairly paid for the work and the produce that they produce and do.
And if Fine Gael get back in government, would that be a priority with Fine Gael to ensure that farmers are looked after and our food security, and be able to create a financial strategy for the farmers and keep the consumers happy for us buying from our local farmers?
Well, I suppose I can only say in answer to that is that I don't know whether Fine Gael currently are going to do that, but if I get elected, I will certainly advocate on behalf of the farmer. There's no doubt in that, because those are the people that I interact with day in, day out, and they're vital to the future of our country.
Yeah, and it's also important to point out as well that the farm or farmers working on it, they're a small business as well, and without them, a lot of rural areas would be struggling. So if the farmer is doing well, rural Ireland can do well also.
Absolutely, Paul. I mean, for every one working farm in Ireland, it supports 3 jobs. So there's 116,000 farmers in Ireland, and that's roughly around 360,000 jobs directly or indirectly in farming.
And that
So
supports the local
that
economy.
is how important it is.
And the local economy as well. And
Yeah.
it's keeping everything going around. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's supporting local farmers, supporting local food producers, and local economy and employment. And then it's also helping our health, because if we're eating freshly grown food that is sourced from local farmers, our health will improve as well, because we're not eating imported food that is probably chemically induced to keep it fresh, and so therefore that would actually help our health system.
100%. Like we currently produce the best food in the world with love, care, and attention, and other countries are able to import what they produce cheaper and put it on the shelves. You'd wonder what quality was coming into the country, because the quality going out of it is fantastic.
Yeah.
And we talk about, we're still on the rural community. You are running in a rural community, and like as well as we've talked about the local business and farmers supporting that. So also keeping small local family run businesses, like as you said, you had a shop, is also vitally important, because they are also the employers of the rural community, and mothers and school leavers as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And I would say it is something that is cropping up on the doors, I suppose. And there was a lot of concern and, I suppose, noise about the VAT rate being left alone within the budget. And I would think personally myself that the government do need to bring in temporary measures to support small family-owned run businesses. They are under extreme pressure, and if they do not get targeted supports that really will keep them afloat, I'd be worried for their future of those small businesses, because currently it's going to take time to get people in those villages living and the population up. So if we don't support those businesses currently, and if they leave, we'll never get them back. So they have to be supported. It may not be about the solution may not be completely about the VAT rate, but there must be a targeted support for the small family-owned business, or we're going to lose them.
And it's the heart and soul. I remember when I had my business program on radio, Carlow used to tell me, Roisin, small local businesses are the DNA of every village, every town, and every high street and surrounding streets in the towns and cities in every county in Ireland.
Absolutely. It's the meeting place for every member of the community. So, I mean, that's where all the business is done. The wheeling and dealing and the trading and the chats and the gossip and the whole lot. And that makes a vibrant community. People go for a coffee, go to the post office, go for a drink, have a bite to eat. Those are vital to the community and vital to rural Ireland.
Of course, Michael, you're involved with the Roar Inistoige for a long time. It's these small local businesses that when the Roar Inistoige gets to a final or something like that, they're the ones that are kicking for sponsorship. Like whether it's deliberate or not, I'm wearing green and red, so that's not a bad thing. But
fair play. And the Roar Inistoige are green and red, and where I was originally born in Muckalee are also green and red. So I'm covering a lot of bases.
yeah. My mum is from Patrick Street in Kilkenny City, which their team would be James Stevens, which are the village will be playing the Royalist League next year. So there is a red and green team, but like even the likes of our GAA clubs, they rely on the local businesses to support them. So like it's just goes to show how embedded they are in their community.
Absolutely, and we a good few years ago now had our post office closed, and we had the community got together and really rallied behind getting that back up and going, moved into the shop because it was vital to the community. We were one of the few places in Ireland to hold on to that service, and I would see it day in day out there now that the local people now, as much as possible, will use the post office because they see the value of that service, and that's brilliant to see.
Absolutely, and it's important for local, particularly the older people who may use that to collect their pension and things like that. So keeping a service like that in a village is so important.
It's huge. It's huge. Yeah, and it's one complements the other. All businesses that are in a small town and village, they complement each other. People come in and, like I said, they'll shop around in the different various shops and do their business, and it's brilliant for the local economy.
Absolutely.
Well, and also it's vital that we keep all those local businesses going on for the local schools as well, which brings us nice on to our next topic of education. Local schools, maybe because I've gotten interested, my son's moving out to the country as well. I'm thinking of my grandchildren, if I ever have them. But it's so vital, isn't it, that local schools, when you have the local community, the local amenities, and looking after small local businesses, and more people will move back to the countryside and live in rural areas, that schools are looked after.
Absolutely, and I suppose just to say, to be fair, within rural Ireland and rural Kilkenny, like funding for rural Ireland has been huge. But my issue is so you, whether you've applied for the sports capital grant or that, look at the facilities a lot of the sports clubs have now are really, really good. Look at the walkways and cycleways that are around hurling fields and wooded areas now. Fantastic, all brilliant for rural areas. I'm just saying and arguing the point that where the town and village renewal scheme, the villages and towns are looking well, but we need people in them. And the schools are obviously the heartbeat of that as well. And if you have more people, it allows you to hold on to the services that the school provide, which is extra teachers that are vital to any community.
And education. There's a lot of talk about the 9 million phone pouches. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's, I suppose when I first heard it, I was in two minds. I suppose the reality is, for me, and I'm not a techie by any sense of the imagination, but I would imagine there is an issue with mobile phones with the younger generation these days. They seem to be stuck to their phones the whole time. But I suppose the other side of my brain was saying, surely there was a simpler way of sorting out the phones in school hours than having to invest 9 million of taxpayers' money for pouches. I mean, most, as far as what I've learned from talking to teachers, that most schools have their own individual policies anyway. So it is kind of dealt with. And the other side of that is some of the schools are using the students' phones for their work because they have to, because they're not fully funded for the tablet or the laptop that are provided. So therefore, to say blanket ban on phones is a bit ridiculous when some schools are not fully funded for their own individual device and they need their phone. So that's it. It's, in my view, a bit silly.
That's an eye opener now for me.
Me too.
Yeah.
Do you know? And too, like when you think about all the additional needs and the neurodivergent students, you know, you think 9 million would go a long way in providing extra supports and even technology equipment for children who are dyslexic or autistic or anybody who's within the neurodivergent. And
Absolutely. Whether it was for technology supports or for specific supports for students, I think the money would have been far better spent in those areas. I suppose the access to the services, whether that be speech and language or physiotherapy or whatever service is needed, is the waiting time is too long. Yeah. There's no doubt. It's extremely difficult to get into those services. And that funding would have been better spent there. Now, the fund there, I'm not sure in those specific areas is it a funding issue, but it's definitely an issue with staff in that they're finding it extremely difficult to fill those positions, which leads to an extremely long waiting list. But it's something that has to be addressed.
Well, my next question with the education, you probably know what I'm going to say, is the SPHE. I have been inundated, like lots of people, with parents asking Paul and myself to do a program on the sexual education and the over explicit. Well, parents, this is parents, it's not coming from anyone else. Parents are quite concerned of the content, two, the text and the wording and descriptive words that are being used, and the visual images. What's your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think they're far too. It's just far too radical for me. Now I'm a very old-fashioned man, but would you believe it? We had a discussion at our council meeting Monday with a senior councillor in Mary Hilda Kavanagh, with a huge amount of experience, who would be on Board of Management and Carlow Kilkenny ETB, and those issues that they have to deal with, the language and the visual elements to all of that now is, in my view, completely out of line. I think I don't think it should be anywhere in the educational system whatsoever.
And the money that was put towards creating this and put into the SPHE for this content could again been put into something a lot more beneficial into the educational system.
Absolutely, and I have no issue. I have no issue with them with them sitting down and talking and developing developing solutions, or discussing mental health issues and well-being and all that sort of stuff. Fine, but some of the sexually sexual references and content and words that are introduced into this, I'm flabbergasted with even what Councillor Mary Hilda Kavanagh had informed me of what was coming before them, and it shouldn't be involved in educating young people, in my view.
Okay. Interesting. And I suppose as well, it's important to note as well, Kilkenny, or I'll let you ask this question, Roisin, because it's a subject that's very, very close to your heart. We're Carlow Kilkenny is a military constituency.
Oh yes, because my son's in the Defence Forces, so I'm quite passionate about the Defence Forces. I'm very proud Defence Force mammy. We live in a military constituency. We're a very proud military city. even for blowing to say that, you know, we're a very proud military city. So, and your colleague who you mentioned earlier on, Phil Hogan, saved our 3rd Infantry Battalion here in Kilkenny when it was either closed Clonmel or closed Kilkenny. He fought very, very fiercely, pardon the pun, but he fought very fiercely for to keep the Defence Forces here in Kilkenny, and our military barracks, the 3rd Infantry Battalion, you know, it actually contributes to our local economy. So when and if Fine Gael get back into government, if you get back in this time, will you make Defence Forces a priority?
Yeah, of course, it would be in my interest to support the barracks inside in town. Absolutely. I suppose the Defence Forces are known worldwide as a peacekeeping. We're a peacekeeping country, and so supporting our Defence Forces with the best training, the best equipment, and conditions possible is of huge importance, because those that go out to keep the peace within the country are putting their lives on the line.
Yeah.
So I mean, they have to be supported and prioritised with every support possible.
And so we've asked this to every candidate come in. Would you like to send a message through this? What would you to all the men and women in the 124, I think 123rd, 124th or 123rd Infantry Battalion over in South Lebanon now? What would your message be to those men and women who are over there and to their parents?
Well, I suppose firstly, I hope that they're all in safety of whatever environment they're currently in what is an absolutely volatile part of the world currently, and just to thank them and thank those that are there and their families and loved ones. On behalf of the Irish people, we're very proud of what they're doing in trying to promote peace in an area of the world where there's such horrific murder and killing going on at the moment, and we're extremely proud of them to mind themselves and to come home safely.
Yeah, absolutely.
We thank them for their service as well to
Absolutely.
all the men and women who are over there and here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
absolutely. And Roisin mentioned your colleague, Michael Phil Hogan, who played an instrumental role in retaining the barracks in Kilkenny City, but over a decade ago. He's now back in the fold as an advisor to Simon Harris and Fine Gael. Surely having a gentleman with his level of wisdom and experience at both local, national, and international politics can only be a massive asset to Fine Gael as they go into a general election.
yeah, absolutely, Paul. I think he's a huge addition to the team. I suppose he like you've mentioned. I suppose he brings a huge amount of experience, amount of knowledge. He has a network now of people and businesses, and that he's built up across Ireland, across Europe, and even the world at this stage. So it can only be a good thing that Phil Hogan is back involved in politics in general, I suppose, you know.
Yeah, well, without a shadow of doubt, and of course, your colleague and your good friend, who you know a very long time, John Paul Phelan, he's stepping down. As you mentioned there earlier on, he did, twist your arm to run for the locals back in 2014. How big of an influence has he been on your political career?
He's been extremely influential. I suppose the lessons that I've learned, I suppose, off John Paul Phelan would be honesty and integrity. Always within your work. And I suppose the number one thing he would have always said to me, and would have instilled in Pat Dunphy as well. He would be a big advocate of the one trait that matters and matters only within politics is the people come first, regardless of what department or official you're dealing with. You represent the people, and that was a message that he always, himself and Pat Dunphy, would have always put across to me. And I think that's what I intend to keep doing for the rest of my political career, however long or short that is.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose that is the thing, you know, that you know, some maybe it's lost sometimes. Like it's your peers go out there, they put that number one beside you, and they elect you into be it a council seat or hopefully in your case a Dáil seat now. You know that when you have the support of the people like that, you got to deliver for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, you have to represent them to the best of your ability. I certainly can't promise the sun, moon, and stars and get everything delivered. But I think if you're open and honest with people, you do your very best for them. I think people respect that and appreciate that, and you will have a good reputation at least, regardless of what result comes out of an election. I think that's the most vital thing in politics.
And people, do you think people vote more on the personal vote, more than the party vote? What's your thoughts on that?
I think, I suppose maybe the older generation would be more inclined to stick to the party trend, I suppose. But I think more and more we're seeing now people voting for a person and not the party. And transfer wise, I think that's seeing transfer wise even that one time a voting card could be 1, 2, 3 Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael or whatever down the line. Now the transfer could be 1 for Fine Gael, 2 for Sinn Féin, 3 for Labour. It can be absolutely anywhere. So yes, you need to appeal to a wide range of people now. You just don't count on. I can't count on the Fine Gael vote to get me elected. I will obviously represent them to the best of my ability, but there's also a floating vote out there that I need to tap into, and hopefully I can.
And also, will you be looking for people to loan them your vote?
I'll take any possible way they can give it to me. I'll take any vote any way they can.
Yeah, I think we interviewed your colleague in Mayo, Councillor Jerry Kyle. And he had a great saying, slogan. He said, "Elected by some to represent all." So not only do you represent those that voted for you, you also represent those that didn't.
Yeah, that's true. It's good. It's a good statement. All right, I might rub it on him.
I'm sure you won't mind. I'm sure you won't mind.
So, Paul, you also want me to mention about, as Michael, you work with older people.
Yeah. Yep. You worked with you worked as a care assistant. You worked with older people. I'm sure if you got elected, you'd like to see things. What things would you like to see done for older people, not just living in rural Ireland, but beyond that as well?
Yeah, and I suppose there's a couple of things there. I suppose the carers, whether they're family members or agencies going in caring for older people, I think they need supports, and the older person living at home needs supports in relation to the adaptation of housing, so that it will allow them to maintain in their own home. I think it's absolutely vital. So there needs to be a huge improvement in the grant funding in relation to allow people to live at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is definitely something that I would be advocating for if I was lucky enough to be elected. There's no doubt. And more support then for you've Gan House over in Graignamanagh, the community hospitals, I think is a brilliant model. You have
Can't help
centre.
man.
You have a centre in Graignamanagh
Oh,
there that live.
going on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Paul, are
Yeah.
you frozen? Yeah. I think Paul might, yeah, you're back,
Paul
Paul.
is
I think
frozen.
you froze
Back,
on
yeah.
us, Paul.
Oh, did I? Sorry.
Sorry,
Sorry.
Michael. You were talking about the Graignamanagh.
Yeah, but there are you Gan House in Graignamanagh for me provides an absolutely unbelievable service, and it has a number of independent living chalets surrounding it, and the main centre has individual rooms that maybe people need closer care and attention. But the individual chalets allow people to live in those chalets independently, but also have access to their meals, their health care. And I think it's something that should be really expanded across the country.
Mm. My great aunt lived in one of those you could say or I would say it's a community, because my great aunt did
Yeah,
that over in England, and I thought that was amazing too. She had her own bungalow and nobody had to. She was 94 at the time, and she was
yeah,
still very independent, still very 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 active as well, So
yeah,
and I think it keeps everybody. It really does help the community, and it helps the family, and it helps the the resident within. They don't have to go into a home. They don't have to go to
Mm,
hospital, and
yeah,
they have people all around them, and that's a community.
absolutely. And Ireland, the length and breadth of Ireland, we are known for one thing: we are community-based people. We love the community setting. And an older person, whether it's living at home or in an independent chalet, they have the
mm,
comfort and support of the community with them, and that allows them that gives them comfort. Number one, it gives their family comfort as well, knowing that the supports and the community that are there for their loved one if needed, and it's vital.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And if you can keep an older person in their home or in some independent supported living, if you look at it in pure economics, it's there's a massive saving to the state, so it's a win-win all around.
Yeah, and like the older generation now, in my opinion, would have went through the greatest transformation that will ever be seen in this country. Like those that are in their 80s and 90s now would have seen no electricity
Yeah,
from walking to school, some with shoes, some without,
Mm.
very true.
to currently how we live our lives now. How big of a change? It'll never that amount of change will never be seen within a country ever again.
And
We,
they
I-
built
we
Ireland. They
Yeah,
built Ireland.
they did indeed, and contributed to building an awful lot of other countries as well. Let me tell you.
They
Very
did.
true. Very true.
Yeah,
Michael, you're all set and ready for this impending announcement of when the general election is. But we have, I think around the world, there's about 40, I think it's 44, 46 general elections going on in the countries around the world. But everyone has their eyes focused on the American election. Have you paid any attention to the American elections?
uh, I have. It catches my eye the odd time, I suppose. Um, I'd still be disappointed. Like early on, obviously, I would have been extremely disappointed with America in, I suppose, that they had two options to the American people at the early stages of the election. It was current President Joe Biden and former President Trump. But I mean, you'd just be saying, I kind of switched off at that stage. If that's all the American people have to vote for or have to offer, you'd there's no point in listening really. So it has, I suppose, shaken it up with Joe Biden standing aside and Kamala Harris obviously being the nomination now. So it's interesting. I'd be a little bit worried if Donald Trump gets elected. To be honest, he's definitely very much in favour of bringing the foreign direct investment that we have back home to his own United States. So that would something that would concern me slightly if he was to become president of the United States. But I'm kind of caught up in this in our own elections more so than the American ones. That's what
Well, I suppose if that is a concern, which is a massive concern, right?
Yeah.
Now my light's gone. A massive concern, but also would that then not encourage us here in Ireland to actually, buckle up and start really reinvesting in our own manufacturing, in our own building up our own businesses, and even from small local crafts to small local businesses to manufacturing here in Ireland and exporting and creating our own really good business model.
It would indeed, and it's something maybe there should be more emphasis put on, so that it would allow us to be more secure, because we are definitely very dependent on those multinationals at the moment, and they get good terms here. There's no doubt. That's why they're here. But if we could invest a little bit more within the sectors that you mentioned, I think it would lead to a more self-sufficient and sustainable business model, I suppose, for the country in general.
Because you can't blame Donald Trump for looking after his country and his employees and his economy and employment. You can't blame Donald Trump for that. He's doing what he has to do to, as he says, make America great again.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. 100% agree, and they would need to take that into consideration, I think, definitely from now on, in relation to the investment they give to our own industry, and seeking to develop that into something that can be sustained long term.
Okay.
Paul, any more questions?
No, I've all my questions asked, Michael. I don't know about you, Roisin. Have you any more questions you'd like to put to Michael?
No, I think Michael, you covered everything, and you even far more and beyond, and went into great detail. But what we do on the Irish Political Roundup is we give you the floor, we give you the camera, and for you to talk to the voters out there why they should vote for you, and also even why people should loan their votes to you.
Very good. Okay, well, obviously, first of all, just to thank Paul and Roisin for a good grilling on the interview. It was extremely interesting, really enjoyable. But I suppose just to finish up, I'm putting my name forward in this general election, Councillor Michael Doyle. I have the experience. I've been a councillor for the last 10 years. I have a good work ethic. I'm going to be a strong rural voice, I suppose, for the people of Carlow Kilkenny. And I think there's two elements to it. South Kilkenny would have always had a voice, either represented by John Paul Phelan or Bobby Elward over the last numerous terms in office. And I think those people should consider me to be their voice. But also the rural aspect of what my passion is in supporting farmers, supporting rural Ireland. Carlow Kilkenny constituency is predominantly a rural constituency, and I can be that rural voice in a time where there are less and less Dáil deputies from rural Ireland, because the populations are in the urban centres are more populated, and the TDs are from those urban centres. We need people of a rural background to voice the opinion of Carlow and Kilkenny, and I can be that voice. and I want to be that voice. And I hope that you could consider me for a vote, loan me a vote, Roisin, if you can, and I will definitely do my best to represent the people of Carlow and Kilkenny. And hopefully I will get there on, we'll say, the 29th.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it's not the 29th because my son's not here. Michael Doyle, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Irish Political Roundup and take your time out of canvassing on the door-to-doors. And we really appreciate you supporting the Irish Political Roundup and coming on and talking to us tonight.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Roisin, and thanks, Paul. Yeah, it's a pleasure.